Notre Dame's defense is deep and it is stacked with talent, but who's going to run out with the first team unit? Coming up, we're breaking down the post-spring defensive depth chart and highlighting who's ready to make an impact.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer at Fox Sports, and today is Wednesday, May 14th, and I appreciate you starting your day right here, making this your first watch or listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Before we get started, a couple of quick programming notes. First, don't forget to hit that subscribe button on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform if you have not done so already. Plus, the Friday mailbag is back this week for the first time in a long time. If you've got questions about Notre Dame football, recruiting, or anything in between because it is the summertime, drop them in the YouTube comments, send them over on X at Locked On Irish, or DM the show on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod to be featured on Friday's show. As for today, we're going to dive into Notre Dame's post-spring defensive depth chart. On yesterday's episode, I did the same exercise for the offense, plus I had some thoughts on 3 primetime games on the Notre Dame home slate this year. So if you missed that, be sure to check it out after this episode. We're going to start with the defensive line, then move to the linebackers and nickelback, and wrap things up with the rest of the Notre Dame secondary. I'm going to break down the projected starters, key backups, and where the strengths and weaknesses lie heading into fall camp. But we begin in the trenches. Marcus Freeman always says he wants an offensive and defensive line-driven program, so it makes sense that we would start this exercise on the defensive line. So let's look at the Viper position. One of the best on the entire team. They've got Boubacar Traore, who I believe is going to go out there with the ones, and then right behind him, it's like a Boubacar Traore or Jordan Botelho or Junior Viliamu-Asa, who basically came in and saved the season last year once Traore and Botelho got hurt. And then behind Viliamu-Asa, I've got Logan Thomas and Dominic Hulak. I have Traore over Botelho as the starting Viper right now, even though Botelho was arguably the best defensive player or had been playing the best of any defensive player before he got hurt last season. He was awesome against Texas A&M and really was one of the few guys that really gave it his all against Northern Illinois and was playing one of his best games of his career in that first half against Purdue. Already had a sack, had another tackle for loss before he suffered that season-ending injury. But I think Traore is going to be more ready to go earlier than Botelho, so that's why I have him with the slight edge as the starter. But these guys are going to rotate a lot. And I had heard that Botelho had been kicking the tires in the transfer portal. I don't think I'm breaking any news here. That's been pretty widely reported at this point in time, but he's obviously elected to stay at Notre Dame, and I think that might be partially because there's just so many good players in this room, so he's going to have to split reps with Traore, likely with Viliamu-Asa, and potentially even Logan Thomas as well, even though he's 4th on the depth chart right now, or at least that's how I have it, because he contributed way more than I expected he would as a true freshman, and I think that he could take a big step forward this year after having a healthy offseason, because he wasn't even healthy last offseason. He was an early enrollee but didn't get to contribute all that much because he was recovering from an injury and was still a factor in the fall. So now in year 2 with a healthy offseason, I think that he's going to be ready to make some contributions for the team this fall. But there's just a lot of veterans in that room that are also ready to play. So I got Traore, Botelho, Viliamu-Asa, Thomas, and Hulak. Now, on the other defensive end, strong side end, I think it's going to be Bryce Young first and then Josh Burnham right behind him. It's going to be a heavy dose of those two guys at this position. And then behind Burnham, I've got Cole Mullins and Christopher Burgess Jr., the true freshman. I've got Young over Burnham now. It could go either way. Burnham actually played at 90 more snaps than Bryce Young did last year. Granted, Young was a true freshman. Burnham had been around for a little bit, but Burnham was also dealing with an injury throughout last season, and considering what he was able to do, I think he's one of the most underrated players on the entire team. Him and Junior Viliamu-Asa are very underrated, but they are very important players to this defense, and I think that had Burnham not suffered that ankle injury against Northern Illinois, he could have been an even better player last season. Like Al Washington was raving about Josh Burnham throughout fall camp, and he was playing really well. Him and Botelho, the only real guys in that defense that were playing well against Northern Illinois, but then he suffered a pretty serious ankle injury in that game, and I think that just kind of lingered throughout the rest of the year. So that combination of Young and Burnham Burnham, sort of the steady veteran, and then Young, who I believe is going to be a superstar at Notre Dame, potential first-round pick down the road. I think we're going to start seeing signs of that this season. That's why I have him at number 1. And then Cole Mullins, I think, is a young guy who seems to flash every single time he's given the opportunity. But right now, there is just too much talent ahead of him. Same with Christopher Burgess Jr. in his true freshman season. Maybe he could come in and play like Logan Thomas did last year, but I think it's a lot to ask given how much talent and experience Notre Dame has on the edges. Now, looking at the interior of that defensive line, this is where it gets interesting. So defensive tackle, I've got Gabe Rubio going out with the starters, and at nose tackle, I've got Jason Onye. The reason I have that is because that is what Notre Dame went out there with the starting unit in the blue gold game. Does that mean that's going to be what they roll out there with in the first game against Miami? To be determined. But I think at least at the start of fall camp, they're going to have Rubio and Onye out there with the first team. But then there's Jared Dawson, the transfer from Louisville, who I am very high on. Technically, he's the backup defensive tackle based on how they rotated him in during the spring, but he could also end up starting at nose tackle. I think they're trying to figure out the best place for Jared Dawson, but he's played a lot of college football. I'm sure he can thrive at either one of those positions. It's just a matter of finding out what that defense needs at that specific time. And then at the backup nose tackle, I've got Donovan Hinish. So Gabe Rubio, Jared Dawson, and then Armel Mukam at defensive tackle, and I think you could maybe even fit Brendan Vernon in there as well, although he's suffered torn MCL injury. That's going to keep him out for some time. And then at nose tackle, Onye, Hinish, and then Sean Sevillano Jr., and then Elijah Hughes. So there's a bunch of names at 2 different positions, but there's going to be a heavy rotation here. Gabriel Rubio might be the most important player of this entire group, though. I think he has a chance to be special this season. He's got the size that they need and then they want, right? Rubio is 6'5", 319 pounds. That's borderline Riley Mills. Rubio is not as explosive as Riley Mills, but he's dealt with a lot throughout his career at Notre Dame. He's healthy. He has no issues with the university, and he's been able to go through a whole offseason. And I think that based on what we saw from him in an increased role in the college football playoff once Riley Mills went down, there are plenty of reasons to be optimistic of what Gabriel Rubio can do this season. So I feel the most confident that Rubio is going to start at defensive tackle. Right now, Onye is technically the starting nose tackle. I think by the start of the season, Jared Dawson could certainly slot in there as well. Then Donovan Hinish is a guy who's probably not going to start, barring injury, but he's a great player off the bench, and he's going to do all the right things. Unfortunately for him, he's just going to have to deal with being undersized for the rest of his football playing days. And even though I have Onye in there as the starter right now, personally, I think he's best suited to be the first guy off the bench in a similar role as Donovan Hinish. Look, I am thrilled that Jason Onye is back with this team. I'm just a little bit skeptical about how consistent he can be as a starter. I think he can be a great backup at the position, and he could still play a hell of a lot and be a big contributor for this defense. But again, just have a little bit of concerns considering he missed basically the vast majority of last season, played like the first 4 games before he had his leave, and then missed the whole playoff. And he wasn't with the team. He wasn't practicing. He wasn't doing any football activities. So that's why I have my concerns about him. But honestly, when you look at the starters, not just for the defensive tackles, but also on the edges, like it doesn't really matter as much who goes out there at the start of the game. It's about who's in during the most critical plays. Because RJ Oben, the transfer from Duke, like he started a lot of games last year, but he was a non-factor in most of the biggest moments of the season, up until that Georgia game, obviously, because Bryce Young was getting a lot of action at strong side end as a true freshman, same with Josh Burnham. So I'm optimistic about this group as a whole. I still think that the defensive tackle position is the biggest question mark on this entire defense, but I feel a lot better about that group now than I did at the start of spring. We're just going to have to see how this group gels because I think they are loaded with talent at both defensive end positions, and it's just going to be a matter of mixing and matching this group, because you can't replace Howard Cross and Riley Mills. It's not possible to do it with 2 guys. But could a 5-man rotation or maybe even a 6-man rotation of Rubio, Dawson, Onye, Hinish, Mukam, and Hughes be enough to replace Cross and Mills in the aggregate, a la Moneyball? Time will tell. But overall, I feel very good about Notre Dame's defensive line going into the summer. With the defensive ends stacked and ready to disrupt, the guys behind them are just as important. So let's talk about the linebackers and the nickel group, where there are several players who are poised to break out in a big way. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there has never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Jalen Brunson has been unstoppable this playoffs, and you can back him up by betting on his over in points, rebounds, or assists. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. All right, here's my pick. If you were listening to the show yesterday and you bet on the Pacers money line, congrats. I gave out a winner as much as it paid me to say it as a Cavs fan. That ending was the most predictable thing in the world. My pick for tonight, I've got the Celtics. -4.5. That's what you can get right now on FanDuel. They are at home. Yes, they just did suffer a devastating injury to their star, Jason Tatum, who suffered a torn Achilles. He's going to be out all of next season as well. A devastating blow to that team. But I think the Doc Rivers theory is going to come into play here, where the Celtics are going to come out and they're going to give everything they have because their backs are up against the wall. And I think the Knicks might take their foot off the gas a little bit, knowing that their star player on the other team isn't going to be out there on the floor. So I think the Celtics are going to surprise people, although I guess it's not a surprise because they're favored in this game. But I think they're going to win. I think they're going to cover at home. They might not win the series, but I think they are going to force a Game 6 in New York. So head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you will get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, now let's take a look at the linebackers, and I think this is the deepest position on the defense, which makes the depth chart the hardest to project, especially when you consider there are only going to be 2 linebackers on the field for the majority of the time, and linebackers coach Max Bulla is going to move these guys around a lot. So let's look at the middle linebacker position first, the Mike linebacker. I think it's going to be Drayk Bowen, Kyngstonn Viliamu-Asa, Matt Framo, and then Bodie Cajon. As for the will linebacker, the weak side linebacker, I think Jalen Sneed is going to go out there with the ones. He's going to move over from the rover position, which is where he's been the past 3 years for his career, but that is the position that comes off the field when Notre Dame goes to nickel, 4-2-5, 4 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, and then 5 defensive backs. So given what Jalen Sneed has done this offseason, he's gotten bigger, he's gotten stronger, and I think he's more consistent day to day. I think he is actually going to start at will and take Jack Kaiser's place from last season. But then I also think Kyngstonn Viliamu-Asa, the backup Mike linebacker, is going to be the backup will linebacker as well. Behind KVA, I think it's going to be Preston Zinter and Kahanu Kia. There's one name I have not mentioned, Jaden Osbury. I think he's going to be the technical starting rover if Notre Dame is in a 3-man defensive set. Jaden Osbury is still a very talented player, but even though Sneed had traditionally been the rover, I just think it makes more sense for him to get more of his reps at the will, and I think it's going to be harder to bring him off the field given the improvements that he has made this offseason. But Osbury is still a good player, and I think that when they do go to 3 linebackers, he is a good fit at rover. That's been his position. They even cross-trained him at nickel for a little bit before last season. Behind Osbury, Rizak could come in if they need someone in that at that spot who's never played before, and then Ko'okia. But it doesn't really matter where these guys are placed because the one thing you can count on is Drayk Bowen will be the starting Mike. He's not going to move from that spot. He's going to be there. He's going to have the green dot, getting the calls from the defensive coordinator and communicating with the rest of the defense. I also think he's going to be the leader of this defense. So it makes sense having him right there in the middle. Every other linebacker that I just mentioned can and will move around. KVA is the backup Mike, but he could also start at the will right next to Bowen, even though he kind of can be the Mike linebacker. And if Bowen ever needs a break, then KVA can play the Mike as well, and he could be the second guy with the green dot. I mentioned Jalen Sneed. In the past, he's been a rover, but I think that now he brings a level of athleticism that, frankly, most linebackers don't possess. And the biggest issue for him throughout his career was being consistent, not just on a play-to-play basis, game-to-game, practice-to-practice, right? It was a big-picture thing with him, but I think now that he's in his senior year, he's matured, and he is ready to play his best football. This could be the year where he finally lives up to that 5-star hype, and if that is the case, it's going to be awfully hard to take him off the field. So it's going to be a combination of Bowen, Sneed, KVA, and Jaden Osbury. And I feel like Osbury is kind of forgotten about, and I get it. He didn't finish the season strong last year, but he also finished second on the team in tackles for loss last season. He is going to be out there a lot, so you know that it's going to be Bowen, KVA, Snead, and Osprey. That's solidified. But how much is Manfremo going to play as a true freshman? He's at the mic backing up Bowen and KVA, but Kyngstonn Viliamu-Asa played 343 snaps last season, and he was out for 3 games. Now, granted, one of those was a playoff game. We can't guarantee that this Notre Dame team is going to be in the playoffs, even though I think they will. But just because they ran 5 linebackers last year does not mean they are going to do that this year. They lose Jack Kaiser, so there are certainly going to be a lot of reps that they need to make up, but maybe they just split it more amongst those 4 guys. And then you've got Preston Zinter, who continues to show up on a daily basis. Max Bull raves about him. It seems like every time the media is in attendance for practice, Preston Zinter is out there making plays. But is he athletic enough to stay out there? He does all the right things. Can he make the big-time plays? That is a question that he's going to have to answer. So I think Zinter versus Fremo is going to be a fun battle to watch for the 5th spot. Like I said, all these guys are going to move around, and then guys like Bodie Cahoon, Teddy Rizak, Kia, it's going to take some time. There's just too much talent at the top of that room, but can't wait to see what these Notre Dame linebackers can do this year, because it has been a strength of the defense for years, but now I think it's going to reach a whole new level just given the amount of athletes they have playing the position. All right, so when the 3rd linebacker comes off the field, typically the rover, guess who comes in? The nickel, and that's what we're going to hit on next, even though they're technically not a linebacker. They're more of a defensive back. Devontae Smith, the transfer from Alabama, he is definitely going to be the starting nickel, no doubt about that. Behind him, kind of a big question mark. So I put Carson Hobbs here, and then behind Hobbs, Ben Minnick and Dallas Golden. It's kind of a tricky situation because whenever Notre Dame is going to run nickel, if Devontae Smith is healthy, he is going to be out there. I am just very excited to see what he can do because there's just been a lot of hype around him since he came over from Bama. The reports on him out of winter conditioning are really exciting. His stats last year aren't going to blow you away. 30 total tackles, but he did have 8 run stops, 5 passes deflected, and a forced fumble for the Crimson Tide defense last year. He was targeted 29 times in coverage and only allowed 19 catches for 123 total yards. So he's good in coverage, he's good against the run, and he is a grown man playing a grown man's position. But behind him, I don't really know, because last year, in the rare instances when someone, when Jordan Clark wasn't able to play nickel, it was usually because another one of the corners was hurt. Clark would have to move over to play on the outside, and then Rod Hurd would come in and play nickel. Hurd had experience playing nickel at Northwestern. There's really no one else in this Notre Dame secondary that has experience playing the nickel other than Devontae Smith, at least not at a high level and not as a starter level. So I'm putting Carson Hobbs here, and I believe he could be the first guy off the bench at nickel and both field corner and boundary corner. He is that good. The question for the coaching staff is going to be, is it better for Carson Hobbs to cross-train in all 3 positions, or should he focus on 1 or maybe 2? Hobbs was one of the most impressive players in the spring, and I think they want to get him on the field where they can, because Devontae Smith is going to start, Leonard Moore is going to start, and Christian Gray is going to start as well. So those 3 spots are locked in, and it's just going to be a matter of where does Carson Hobbs fit into the equation, because he is a very talented player. But it's just about getting him on the field in a spot that is best suited for him. But if it's not Hobbs, it could be safety Ben Minnick. He looked good in the spring game, and I think that's good for him because I honestly thought he was a candidate to transfer because he was pretty much a non-factor for the Notre Dame defense last season. Did get some reps on special teams, but I just didn't see where he could play on the defense. Well, it looks like he might have found a role at nickel. Also, true freshman Dallas Golden, he said he wants to play nickel in college. Not a typical request for a true freshman because, like I said, it's a grown man's position, but Dallas Golden is not your typical freshman football player. So if he can hold up physically, he could be a backup this year and potentially the future at the position. But Devontae Smith is going to be the starter. I think the coaching staff can sort of mix and match what they do behind him, but feel very good about Smith, and I feel very, very good about the Notre Dame linebackers this season. All right, we have seen how the front 7 stacks up, but it's been the Notre Dame secondary that has led the way for the defense the past 2 seasons. So who is going to step up and replace Xavier Watts? That's coming up right here on Locked On Irish. To wrap things up, let's look at maybe the best position unit on the entire team, the Notre Dame secondary. Already talked about the nickel position. Now let's shift to the corners. You know who the starters are. Leonard Moore is going to start at boundary corner, and Christian Gray is going to start at field corner. But as I said in the previous segment, I think Carson Hobbs is probably the backup at both of these positions, boundary and field. But then behind Hobbs, at least at the boundary corner, I've got true freshman Creed Thomas. And at field corner, I have another true freshman, Mark Zachary. No surprise here. I think that Leonard Moore and Christian Gray are going to make up one of, if not the best cornerback duos in all of college football. Leonard Moore, freshman All-American, one of the biggest surprises of the season last year, went from being a true freshman who you think could be high or could be good later on, but Benjamin Morrison was extremely high on him, ends up coming in to replace Benjamin Morrison after he got hurt and had a fantastic season, led the team in passes deflected. But Christian Gray is a guy who I was super high on going into last season. Most people were. And I know that last season didn't really end super well for him, even though he had that interception against Penn State to really put Notre Dame in great position to win that game. And he obviously had the 99-yard interception returned for a touchdown against USC to basically put Notre Dame in the playoff. He didn't have a very good game against USC. He gave up the game-winning play against Ohio State, even though he was pretty unfairly put on an island in that position. But going into last season, most people projected Christian Gray as the heir apparent to Benjamin Morrison, not just as the starting boundary corner, but also as the star cornerback on this team. So Leonard Moore's ascension as a true freshman kind of overshadowed what Gray can be. And yeah, he dropped several interceptions at the start of the year, but he was much better at that by the end. His ball skills improved, and if he takes a step forward with his game, specifically his technique and making sure that he stays out of his own head and doesn't let those mistakes pile up, this combo of Leonard Moore and Christian Gray could be better than Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison in 2023. That was an awesome duo. And we saw them at their peak going up against Ohio State when they really could not pass the ball up until that final drive against those two guys. Cam Hart was locked down. Benjamin Morrison was putting the clamps on Marvin Harrison Jr. And I think that Moore and Gray could be that good this year. But a lot of that relies on Christian Gray taking that leap. So Hobbs, first guy off the bench for both of them. And then Creed Thomas is one of three freshman cornerbacks, but he was the only one who enrolled early. And he really impressed in the spring. And I think we've just gotten to the point with Mike Mickens where if he thinks a cornerback is going to be good, odds are he will be good. And he's very good at developing these guys to be ready to go early on. So the fact that Creed Thomas has a head start over his true freshman counterparts being on campus for about 6 months earlier than those other guys and actually being able to go out there and practice with the team would not surprise me if he gets some backup reps this season. Mark Zachary, not very tall, but he's got great length and was a more highly touted prospect than Creed Thomas, so it would not shock me if he made a big impression as soon as he arrives. We know that Mike Mickens likes to rotate his guys, even when he has two awesome corners. Like in 2023, he had Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison, but Christian Gray would come in for a series. And that's another reason why I think he's going to have such a big year this year, because Mike Mickens saw the talent and the ceiling in him as a freshman, and he was like, this guy's ready to be on the field today. So he put him out there, made some plays, had that awesome interception against Pitt on the sideline his freshman year. Great play. So you look at this room, and also I mentioned Dallas Golden in the previous segment at starting nickel. Very possible that he ends up playing the field corner spot, but there is just a lot of young talent in that room. But if Moore and Gray are healthy, odds are they aren't coming off the field. At safety, I've got Luke Talich as the starting field safety, because we know Adon Schuler is going to be the starting boundary safety. That is a lock. But I've got Luke Talich first, then Jalen Stroman second, Tay Johnson third, Jadon Blair four, and then Ben Dominic five at the field safety. So the competition for the starting field safety spot is going to be one of the most intense battles of fall camp. And even though I have Talich as the one right now, and that kind of goes against everything I've been saying about Jalen Stroman, because I've been on record to say that I think Jalen Stroman is going to be the long-term starter at the field safety spot. I just have some concerns about Stroman's health, because I think he's a very good player, has a ton of experience, all that. But he suffered a shoulder injury against Vanderbilt in the season opener of last season. Then he had to have surgery this offseason to clean it up and miss all of spring. That is a long time without any football activity. And even though he's been playing football for years and this isn't new to him or anything like that, Luke Talich ended up having a really good spring in his absence. Same with Tay Johnson. So I think that they're going to have a leg up on Stroman, at least at the start of fall camp. So that is why I have Luke Talich going out there with the ones. We'll see what Jalen Stroman can do in the preseason. Maybe he ends up becoming the first guy off the bench, and it really is like a Rod Hurd 2.0 situation where it felt like Rod Hurd was brought in to be the starter, and then he got beat out by Adon Schuler in spring practice. Maybe that ends up being the case because Luke Talich led the team in tackles in the blue gold game, had one of the biggest hits of the game when he completely just stuffed Aeneas Williams on 4th and goal at the goal line. So I'm excited about what he can do. He's got great size and length for the position. Meanwhile, Tate Johnson, who's only redshirt freshman, one of the best athletes on the entire team. So it's probably going to be a rotation at that spot anyway. Adon Schuler is probably not going to come off the field much, but at field safety, you're probably going to see a good, healthy rotation to make up for the 970 snaps that Xavier Watts played last season. Let me say that again. 970 snaps for one player. Emil Wagner actually beat him out on offense, playing 990 snaps, but that shows you just how good Xavier Watts was for this Irish defense last season. Adon Schuler barely came off the field last year, and he played 768. So that kind of shows you just how much they relied on Xavier Watts to be out on the field every single play, not only as a playmaker, but to be a problem solver on the field. He was like a coach on the field, and he was such a vital part of that defense last year. So it's going to be on the coaching staff to figure out a way to rotate these guys, but with so much talent there, I'm really not that worried. I think they're going to figure it out just fine, and they're going to be very good at safety and defensive back once again. Like, there's just so much talent in this room, and it is so exciting to think about what they can become next year with Leonard Moore in his second full season as a starter, Christian Gray in his third season of college football, and then Adon Schuler, who could be an NFL draft pick after this season. Like, if Adon Schuler plays as good as I think he can this year, he is going to be in the NFL draft next year, and he'll be a 3-and-done player at Notre Dame. And then Luke Talich has been waiting his turn. He's finally got his opportunity. Stroman could be another solid piece. And then maybe Tate Johnson is like this year's Adon Schuler. Plenty of things to be excited about with this Notre Dame secondary, and plenty of things to be excited about this defense overall. Yes, it's the first year with a new defensive coordinator, Chris Ash, but they have so much talent at every single position. Sure, they got some question marks at defensive tackle, but what team doesn't have some questions about their defense at this point in the calendar year? So very excited to see what this group can do this season. Can they build on what Al Golden had established as a defensive coordinator with Chris Ash? Going to be a very fun storyline to watch all season long. But that is going to do it for today's episode. Keep an eye out for big news later today as one of Notre Dame's top running back targets in the class of 2026, Jonas Walton, is set to announce his commitment. Right now, I like where the Irish stand. Be sure to join me tomorrow for a full reaction to Walton's decision and a breakdown of what it means for Notre Dame's class of 2026. And don't forget, Friday, the mailbag is back. You can submit your questions in the YouTube comments on X at Locked On Irish or by DMing the show on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod. Lastly, if you enjoyed today's episode, hit that subscribe button on YouTube or follow on your favorite podcast platform, and I'll see you tomorrow.